Devin, I know you're a huge movie buff. You've always made that clear. Usually your stories start out with, I was at the movie theater. I got to see that new Mandalorian this week, the new one with Grogu or whatever. It was entertaining. Entertaining. I did want to play a game with you guys though, real quick today, because since you're the movie expert, Devin, I want to know if I played you a sound clip from a movie that I'm pretty sure you've seen. I want to know if you can identify it, and I'm going to play it right now for you guys, and I want to see if either of you can actually get it.
I'm so sorry. I failed you. You trusted me. And I failed you.
What is it?
Star Wars Episode 3, where Obi-Wan Kenobi's like, you were supposed to be the chosen one, which also probably applies.
Nope, negative. That's not it. Devin?
It's the sequel to my favorite movie. It's The Dark Knight Rises. It is Alfred at the end of it when Bruce is dead.
You two are wrong, my friend. I could give you guys one more guess, but that's it. Anybody? Before I tell you? That is not Alfred from The Dark Knight Rises. That is Steve Yzerman getting ready to speak to the season ticket holders before the start of the 2026 season.
That's good.
Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Hey, it's Carter Bear, and you're listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast.
Welcome to episode 85 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I am your host, Evan Sabrin, joined as always by my cohorts, Devin Little and Tony Wolak. Lot to get to on today's show. When we last left you, we were just getting the first taste of hearing about Dylan Larkin and the trade request that he has made to leave Detroit. This saga continues. It's been a whirlwind week.
Wait, hold on. Dylan Larkin requested a trade?
Jesus. I mean, did anybody picture this summer going this way? I mean, just the absolute chaos. You got to admit, it's kind of interesting. You know, there's just so much going on. Trade proposals, no movement clauses, team trade lists, preferred trade lists. It's absolutely insane. We saw Helene St. James reported earlier this week that Larkin did submit a 3-team preferred trade list that included Florida, Vegas, and Minnesota. But in the past 2 days, according to Pierre LeBrun, we're now hearing that Steve Yzerman went to Larkin's agent, Pat Brisson, and asked him to kind of expand that list. So there's a lot going on there. There's so many things, and we're going to break that down and tell you what it all means. We're also going to dive into the latest on the Sebastian Cossa rumors that Kevin Weeks has been throwing out here and there. I hate those cryptic tweets he puts out. Like he just put out a goal and like eyeballs. He does that all the time. Like he's trying to come up with some brand of how he releases his news. And to be frank, it's really annoying. But we're going to talk about that. And hey, maybe Cossa's added to a deal with Larkin to get better return for Detroit. So, a lot to discuss today, Before we get started, I'd like to remind you where you can find us. You can follow us on Twitter at Flying Octopod, YouTube at The Flying Octopod, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are also there. So, Tony, I'm going to start off with you. Let's dive into it. I want to kind of hear a brief explanation of how we got to this point, and what are the latest details and things that you're hearing about Dylan Larkin's trade request?
So let's start with the expanded list, because what I'm interpreting from that is Steve Yzerman, he reached out to the 3 teams on the original trade list, Vegas, Florida, and Minnesota, and if he's asking for additional teams, that means he was not pitched a trade proposal that he liked. And when the market is 3 teams, you don't necessarily need to up the ante at all, just because there's only 3 teams, right? And it's like, you don't know Detroit, the other teams just don't know Detroit's perspective. Is like, are they trying to get him out of there as quick as possible? Is Yzerman just going to hold the line? Like, there's no real reason at that point to give your best offer. And so, Yzerman asked Pat Brisson, quick caveat. Did you guys know that Pat Brisson had a quick cameo in an episode of Baywatch? I didn't know that. I found that out on vacation. There was an episode where NHL Breakout, if you remember that, was like by the beach, and he had a cameo in that episode. Like, I saw his name in the credits and I was like, what? That's my vacation show. Whenever we're at the beach on vacation, there's a whole Baywatch channel on Roku TV. Just want to throw that out there. This is not an ad. This is not a sponsorship, but you need to check it out.
Going off the rails early here, I see.
Exactly.
Miami Vice, looking good on you.
So, back on track. If Yzerman is asking for more teams, that means like it just the deal isn't out there at that current state. Now, doing so, like increasing the size of the market, I don't know how many teams Larkin's willing to submit for this round 2 version, but if we go from 3 teams to 6 teams, there's more competition. There is more reason for the teams involved to boost their offer. It's better for the Red Wings. And, a 3-team trade list isn't very big to begin with. So it's not surprising we're right here. But let's say, we're looking at other teams that have Team USA talent who are in win now mode, just like Florida, Vegas, Minnesota. You got to think Dallas would be involved. I know Pierre LeBrun mentioned that Dallas had reached out. Jason Robertson wasn't on Team USA, but again, Team USA player. Jake Ottinger as well. You got to think about Carolina with Jacob Slavin. You got to think about Anaheim with Jackson Lacombe. Utah has Clayton Keller. And again, if we're focusing on just U.S.-based teams, I think that's a good starting point for where things might go. Tampa Bay with Jake Gensel as well. So if the list expands to 6 or 8 teams total, that increases the odds, at least in my opinion, that Detroit will get market value for Larkin, which ideally happens before the draft, because if it gets dragged out even longer, that means, let's be honest, that means Yzerman has to just maintain status quo and add to the team and push for a playoff spot next year, regardless of how the Larkin saga ends. You're going to miss out on the draft for trades and other additions, and you're going to miss out on free agency just because you're sitting on your hands because you don't know what's going to happen with Larkin. No, I don't think so. The draft is the deadline, if for all intents and purposes. And if nothing happens at that point, then, well, he's under contract. So what are you going to do?
I think that so first and foremost, I agree. I feel like this is something that they would ideally like to get done sooner rather than later. I know I was talking to somebody at work today and was saying that as as sad as it might be, Larkin has played his last game in a Red Wings uniform. He has to have. Otherwise, come August, if he's still on the roster, so to speak, you're probably going to have a really uncomfortable conversation between Steve Yzerman and Dylan Larkin, where they just kind of accept the situation for what it is, and they have to find a way forward. I will say this too, and I think that there's a kind of a prevalent thought out there that if Larkin isn't traded before the start of next season, he's just going to sit in the press box and collect dust. I really don't think it will come to that. I think that at the end of the day, Larkin's a professional. Steve Yzerman's a professional. And I also think that both sides understand that the best way to facilitate a trade is for Larkin to show out. And if that means going into next season where he's still the Red Wings 1C, it is what it is. I think both parties will understand what the situation is, and they'll try to get it resolved as soon as possible. But it's Dylan Larkin has done his part to look out for himself. It's now Steve Yzerman's job to look out for what's best for the Red Wings, and he would not be doing his job if he rushed a deal just to get it done before the start of the next season. So if it comes to it, I we're still months away, but if it comes to it, I do think Larkin could play another game for the Red Wings, but he should not.
And you got to think too that Yzerman is the right person to be managing this. And I know there's a lot of detractors out there who just aren't happy with how he's managed the team thus far and how the rebuild has gone. But like, let's be honest, like he holds out for trades that he wants. Like he does not commit to anything less than what he sees as fair value. Um, Even with Quinn Hughes, like it was a steep asking price and he was willing to commit to it. It just, there wasn't like a handshake agreement in place about a contract extension. And for something to be close and then be able then like fall apart just because that aspect wasn't agreed to, that shows, I guess, the level of stubbornness, but in a good way of, someone who's watching out for the best interest of the entire franchise. And on top of that, he does have history managing these sorts of exoduses, right? And there's been plenty of reporting on this. Martin St. Louis, when he was with Tampa Bay and he wanted out, Jonathan Drouin as well. Lightning got pretty good returns for both players. So, I mean, it does, like, I'll be honest, like, even with St. Louis and the Lightning, it sucks when your franchise player wants out. It throws a wrench into the overall plans, but you just gotta do what's best for the organization and try to keep moving forward. And, St. Louis was moved. Ryan Callahan and 2 first-round picks came back. Eventually, the Lightning won a couple cups. And Callahan was an important player, helping build the team to that point. So he's the right person for the job, regardless of what has happened up until this point.
Tony, really quick. Obviously, we unfortunately weren't able to have you on for the full episode last week, and so last week was very much the here's the situation episode. I'll give you 2 minutes or whatever time you need here. I have a two-parter for you. One, I just want your general thoughts on the situation. I'm very curious what you think about the situation. I know it caught me off guard, that's for sure. And then two, what do you think of how Larkin's no trade clause is being utilized in this sense? I've seen a lot of opinions on how it's being used, not necessarily as protection so much as um, it's being used as a sword instead of a shield, basically. I'm curious what you think of how that's coming into play in this situation.
Good questions. Yeah, for those listening and watching, last week my internet decided to kick out right in the middle of me saying something at the beginning of the episode. So I think we found a solution that cooperates with our recording program and my top of the line internet that for some reason doesn't work with our recording platform sometimes. Um, I'll be honest, when I found out the news, I was shocked, like straight up shocked. I knew there was stuff behind the scenes. I just didn't think it would ever come to that. Um, and it just made me think like, wow, like what's next? Like, are the Red Wings gonna like embark on another retool? Like, how is this gonna play out where the Red Wings come out in a favorable position? Because I just didn't see that right away. But the more and more that you look into it, and the more that's being reported on it, it kind of, I don't know, your opinion shifts a little bit. Um, I know public perception shifted a little bit when the trade list came out and it was only 3 teams. That's not, you know, helping your case at all there. When your agent, you as a player, the team, no one's willing to comment on it, that kind of raises it does raise an eyebrow. And then obviously looking at who is in his ear, with his, Olympic teammates, someone like Jack Eichel, who forced his way out of Buffalo. There's an asterisk on that because of the whole injury thing. But Quinn Hughes more or less forcing his way out of Vancouver. Matthew Tkachuk more or less forcing his way out of Calgary. It made me kind of sit back and think, like, did he get talked into, like, going somewhere else from these guys and saying, like, "Hey, man, I don't think it's gonna work in Detroit. Why don't you come over to one of our, super teams, and you can win there, just and experience what we experienced in the Olympics." And if that's the case, and he got talked into that, like, what does that say about the player? What in the person? And so I'm sure, like, more will come out in the future about, like, just the relationship between Larkin and Yzerman and Larkin and his Olympic teammates, and just hearing his perspective on the matter at some point will possibly answer a question or two, but it's it's been a saga. It really has. Um, and then you brought up the no movement clause, and you're right. There's different viewpoints on it, and it all comes down to control, really. And back in the day before no movement clauses and no trade clauses were a thing, GMs could just swing a deal and you're moving across the country. Um, for Larkin to bring up his no movement clause and say, I'm only willing to go to these teams, like, I don't have any objections to him leveraging the clause in his contract like that, because, like, that's what it's there for. The same thing has gone into Patrick Kane's contracts with the Red Wings. Like, in the event that the Red Wings need to sell and Kane becomes a trade deadline piece, he has control over where he could go. Now, this does impact the market. This does impact the possible return. But when you're a player of that stature, you are afforded those rights. Um, and I have no objection to Larkin getting a no movement clause in the first place, how he's using it. It's just all part of the business. Um, and hopefully when this comes to a resolution, whenever that is, it's done so in a way that is favorable to the Red Wings, because if their captain just kind of says, like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, and the Red Wings get a paltry return for him, I mean, that's just awful. It really is. And it resets expectations, it resets the trajectory of the Red Wings. So, I mean, here's to hoping that Yzerman can work his magic and bring back market value for him, because one seeds just don't grow on trees.
What do you guys say to the narrative now that people are concerned about free agents wanting to sign here? Because this situation seems messy. It seems like there was a lot of communication issues, probably at some point. When you're talking about a guy who is a homegrown talent, the face of the franchise, your captain, and he wants out, like, is that kind of concerning? You factor in the fact that the Red Wings have struggled for the past 10 years and missed the postseason, and your leader wants out. Like, does that concern you, especially when we get to free agency, as far as players wanting to sign in Detroit?
My first thought with that question is, I guess it's a good thing that I wasn't expecting the Red Wings to be super active in the free agent market this offseason, right? I think that most of their needs were going to be best suited to be addressed through the trade market, and that's with Larkin on the roster. Now that they're going to have to trade him, what it comes down to, I guess, is what they end up trading him for. If they end up doing something to where they kind of remain competitive, then I don't think it changes it a whole lot. It just changes the complexion of the locker room a little bit. Now, if it ends up being a futures-based thing where it's pretty much just for picks and prospects, then I still don't think it necessarily harms it in a significant way. I think the biggest harm that could be done here is that the situation just sits and it sits and it sits and it festers, and then it becomes a thing where, oh, Steve Yzerman is ignoring Dylan Larkin's request. He's not honoring the trade clause or whatever. At the end of the day, if a player says, I want to be traded, and then the general manager obliges, I don't know what else you can ask for. So obviously, you can, make the argument that the fact that it got to this point isn't good. But I don't, the Red Wings, the Red Wings' reputation, I think, I don't think it necessarily changed from this. I think that this is a result of their reputation. They've been out of the playoffs for a decade at this point. Um, that's why Dylan Larkin left out. Missed. That's why he wants out, and that's why a free agent wouldn't sign with the Red Wings. Not because Dylan Larkin wants out; it's because they've missed the playoffs for 10 years, and that has already happened. That happened whether Larkin was going to return or not. So I think that's the bigger issue, and that's kind of what they're fighting against, and that's arguably why they really needed to make the playoffs the last couple of years to kind of fight back against that perception. But I guess to maybe give a slightly affirmative answer, I do think that any hopes that were still kind of held on to that Quinn Hughes would decide to join Detroit in free agency next year, I don't think that's happening anymore. I really don't. Unless Mama and Papa Hughes hold an intervention and tell all their boys, get your butts back to Michigan. I I think that if they were going to come to Michigan, it would be largely to join Dylan Larkin. So if he's not going to be in Detroit anymore, I just don't see that happening. So as far as that specific free agent is concerned, I do think that this has a pretty big impact. But as far as free agents en masse, I don't think that the Larkin thing specifically impacts it too much. What about you, Tony?
Yeah, I'm not so sure it has a big impact. Players sign with teams for various reasons, and I think that is the most important takeaway here. Like you got, I'll give you examples for all these. Like Brad Marchand re-signed with Florida because he wanted to win more championships. That's it. Like he could have gotten more money elsewhere. He could have gotten more uh, responsibility elsewhere, but he chose the team because he wanted to continue winning. So that's why he signed there. Now, you look at Victor Arvidsson is a good example. He signed with the Boston Bruins this past offseason because that was a good place for him to go and get more responsibility to kind of resurrect himself a little bit. He didn't sign necessarily for the money. He didn't necessarily sign for potentially winning a championship. He saw a good opportunity for him to like increase his standing. And so he goes there. He's going to parlay it into a great deal this offseason, whether that's with Boston or someone else. But he had a good opportunity to build himself back up.
Think of Anthony Mantha in Pittsburgh there too.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't even need to name names here. There are plenty of players who just want the highest contract offer. That's it. While the Red Wings may not be like Stanley Cup contenders, there are prime opportunities on this team. Probably a 1C role, probably a top line left wing role, potentially a couple second line roles for players to come in and potentially thrive in these roles and then parlay that into a bigger payday down the road. You look at players like I feel like Mason Marchment's a good example of someone who can come in, play a bigger role, and do well. Also Bobby McMahon as well. Both those players are going to get, good offers elsewhere, but like where are they going to go where they fit in and feel like they're getting the responsibility they deserve? Like if you want to be Larkin and play second fiddle to like Alex Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk in Florida, then like sure you can do that. Or if you're someone who like believes in themselves and believes they're a part of the solution, then like yeah, there's an opportunity here in Detroit for you to step in and play a big role and contribute to team success. So that's a pitch point as well. Detroit could potentially overpay for players just to like get them on the roster and make themselves competitive. If that's a route we want to go on, maybe Detroit's the only team that offers Alex Tuck 10 million plus. But suffice to say, I don't think Larkin leaving is going to impact that very much. Maybe for some players who are close with Larkin, sure, but for the vast majority of the league, again, like they say it all the time, it's a business. There are plenty of reasons to sign in Detroit besides those two that I mentioned. It's the original six franchise. They have ownership that's willing to spend. They have top-notch facilities. You have a top-notch coach in Todd McClellan. You have legends all around the team with Yzerman running the team, Draper, Lidstrom, Cronwall over in Europe. Like, there are a lot of reasons for players to still want to come to Detroit. And it would be great if, this sort of thing never happened with Larkin and they were building a team around him still and around Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider and Simon Edmondson and Alex DeBrincat. But you got to pivot. And I mean, let's be honest, I don't see the Red Wings taking a step, wanting to take a step back. They may take a step back. I don't think they want to. I think they're over the management and ownership are over the playoff drought and want to figure out a solution for them to take that next step, whether Larkin's there or not.
I think where it has the most immediate impact and where I have, honestly, I think the most questions is how it impacts the players already on the roster. I wonder what this means for like Alex DeBrincat, first and foremost. He has 1 year left on his contract. And while I think that he very much kind of forced his way to Detroit because he wanted to come home to Michigan, I do think that Dylan Larkin being there was a significant selling point as well. Wanted to play with him. They had an established center, Michigan boy as well, right? It's easy to say the Red Wings should throw a lot of money at him and keep him around, but he's got to have somebody to play with. And even if it's Patrick Kane, even if they can convince him to re-sign, he doesn't have like a ton of years left. Like, are you going to convince Alex DeBrincat to sign another 4 or 5, 6 year contract to play with Patrick Kane for 2 more years? I don't know. And then Kane too, for that matter. I think that I am way less confident about him signing another contract with the Red Wings than I was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I would have told you, oh yeah, for sure, keep that 88 jersey out. He'll be back next season. Now, ooh, I almost think it like 100% comes down to what happens with Larkin, because if they're able to swing a deal to where they remain competitive, then I could see him sticking around. The DeBrincat factor's still there. If they're still going to be a team that's competing for the playoffs, then why not stick around? The organization is clearly organization has liked him. He's liked the organization. Why not? Why rock the boat? But also, if it ends up being a futures-based things and it seems like they're going to take a step back, I like I said, Kane doesn't have a whole lot of time left in his career. Maybe he wants to try to get one more cup. It's not going to happen in Detroit. So those two immediately come to mind in terms of who this might directly impact, and it might ultimately force the Red Wings down a certain path as well. But again, I think it's going to we won't know what's going to happen with those guys until we have a better idea what's going to happen with Larkin. What do you think about that, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly risk, and you're right that what happens with Larkin is gonna have an impact elsewhere. But from like everything I've heard, the team is looking for like NHL ready NHL players now, not futures. I mean, there could be futures included as part of the deal, but when I say market value, I mean like you're getting back a comparable player or comparable assets when added together. So let's say Larkin ends up going to Florida for Anton Lundell, the 9th overall pick, and Sam Muskevich. Yeah, he's gone, but Anton Lundell is not a major step down. He could thrive. I mean, he was thrust into a bigger role and Barkov was out, and he did perform pretty well for Florida. Um, and if the 9th overall pick, you can either take a very good player there, or you can use that to acquire a very good player. So I think it just all depends on how, like, you're right. It really does depend on what the trade ultimately is. I could still see Kane re-signing in Detroit. He's just got a good thing going now, like family and kid, and like it's a good setup. DeBrincat's here for another year. Maybe he signs for 1 year and then they reevaluate things together next summer. Who knows? When it comes to this whole situation, like going back to what I said earlier, I really do see the Red Wings like adding. And when you're adding, you're giving DeBrincat, you're giving Kane, you're giving, other free agents reason to stay or even come to Detroit. Like, I know Sebastian Cossa has been in the rumor mill lately. I've been brought that up at the top of the show with Kevin Weeks, tweeting out something cryptic about it. And Devin, you brought up on Twitter, potentially Barrett Hayton might look good in Detroit's 2C role. If Utah is looking at Cossa again, for that matter, they had interest in him at the draft last year when we were trying to work on a deal to get him from the Red Wings. So clearly they like him. They want him. So if Detroit dangles him to add, even if you don't know what Detroit's intent is, the fact that Sebastian Cossa's name's out there and he's being discussed, it signals to me that they're trying to be in win now mode. Because if they're not and they're about to go on a retool, yeah, why would you trade him? He's a top goalie prospect. You put him in the NHL, you move John Gibson instead. Like, that would make no sense. But if they do move him, it says hey, this is part of something to add. So that to me is like a flag that they're going to try to add.
And I think that I agree. I think that their intent is to not take a step back. I think that the fact that they have the longest playoff drought in the NHL right now is a significant thing for this organization, and I do not think that they have any appetite to do a rebuild 2.0 and um, extend this further than it has to be. That what it really comes down to is whether or not Steve Yzerman's going to be able to recoup those types of assets for or from a Larkin trade, and then also add to it. I do think that, end of season, the idea was to press the gas even more on the roster. I do think that even despite the Larkin news, that's still their intent. It's just kind of a curveball in the sense of, okay, I guess we got to go about this a little differently. I do think that it's one of those things where I imagine there's maybe a little bit of shock, maybe a little bit of frustration with the situation. And then once you digest it, you kind of can recognize the opportunity of the situation. If we're being honest about it, the Red Wings have had kind of two timelines going on the roster. There's the Larkin timeline and there's the Seider Raymond timeline. For better or for worse, this forces them to align with the Seider Raymond timeline. And I think that what the primary goal of a Larkin return is to boost that the Seider Raymond timeline even more. If you can get, which by the way, your proposed package there from Florida, sign me up. That's like my ideal package from Florida in that trade. Give me the 9th pick, give me Anton Lundell, and give me Samoskevich. I am down. That's about as good of an offer as you can make, as far as I'm concerned, given the circumstances. But I guess long story short here, this may feel, and it's still for a lot of fans feels like there's a little bit of a sting there. I think that there will always be a sting there about this player. It kind of is what it is, unfortunately. But this is a huge opportunity and a huge fork in the road moment for this organization. And as long and this kind of goes back to what you said off the top, Tony. It's as frustrating as these last few years have been. There probably is not a better GM to be equipped for this to have at the helm for this situation than Steve Yzerman. I think that he is more than equipped to handle the situation. I think that he will not trade Larkin for anything less than he is worth, or at least within a certain approximate value. A kind of, the situation is what it is, but I don't see a scenario where the Red Wings have to take a significant step back, and then we're talking about them picking first overall in next year's draft. I do not see that being a possibility with this, despite the possibility of them losing their top line center and their captain.
I know there's certainly interest from some segments of the fan base to just own it, do a quick retool, build around Seider and Raymond, but one other factor here is just the overall health of the organization. If you have leadership concerns already, and you have like a player like Larkin wanting out. You add that to the playoff drought. You add that to a team that has just gets caved in March and April. You got to think like you can't continue down this path of perennial rebuilding. At some point, you need to break through. At some point, you need to make the playoffs. Otherwise, you're going to end up losing fans. And I know Red Wings fans have been loyal. A lot of them are Lions fans, and that's the most loyal fan you can be.
They're prepared for it.
True. But at some point, you got to be like, this is not good for the organization. This is not good for a revenue stream. Like, have some pride to do what it takes to reach the playoffs, to do some damage in the playoffs, compete for a Stanley Cup again, because no one wants to follow a team that's hopeless.
My last question, and I'm kind of piggybacking off of your point there about pride, and I'm curious what you think about this, Tony. This whole situation has really kind of boiled down to the relationship between two people, Steve Yzerman and Dylan Larkin. Obviously, somebody who's kind of known as the captain, and then the guy who is the current captain. And in the immediate aftermath of the trade request, of that becoming public knowledge is what I was trying to say, good lord. In the aftermath of that, everyone's fingers were pointing at Steve Yzerman. He failed to build a contending team, and this is all on him, right? And then, a few days later, then the news comes out about Larkin's trade list, and there's only 3 teams, and it feels like a complete 180 where now every finger is pointing at Larkin. This is all on him. He's being unreasonable, and thank goodness, we just said it. Thank goodness Steve Yzerman's in charge, right? Um, I'm very curious of your perspective of what this meant for this to come down to the relationship between 2 Red Wing captains. Do you think that this is a relationship that could have been repaired and maybe should have been repaired earlier? And then also, just do you think that maybe, given Yzerman's stature within the organization, if maybe he and others in the organization are kind of insulted by this trade request, given Larkin's status with the team?
What immediately comes to mind for me is, and there are probably a lot of you who don't know this or just were not alive during this point, but when Scotty Bowman came to the Red Wings, Steve Yzerman was a highly talented offensive player. Like, if you look at single season point totals, you have a bunch of Gretzky, you have a bunch of Lemieux. The first person who's not one of those 2 names is Yzerman for most points in a single season. So there was no doubting his offensive ability, but there was some doubt in like doing what it takes to win the big games. Because to that point, the Red Wings really hadn't done that. They had a couple of conference finals appearances in the 80s, but in the early 90s, it was a bunch of flameouts. And so when Scotty Bowman came to Detroit, he challenged Yzerman to become a 2-way player. His offensive numbers would suffer a little bit, but the team would be better overall. And he took that on. He made it through trade rumors. Detroit was talking to Ottawa about bringing in Alexei Yashin and shipping out Yzerman. He made it through out the other side. And just that competitiveness and that determination were what drove him to do that. Now that roles are reversed, but Yzerman's in Bowman's seat. Bowman was also a GM for the Red Wings at some points too. Yzerman is challenging Larkin to be more than he already is, be a stronger leader than he already is. And I mean, to this point, like, because there's been so much reported on their frosty relationship, they just haven't met, they haven't been eye to eye with this. And I think also part of that might be just a generational divide, as like just the relationship between player and coach is so much different, and player and manager too is so much different than what it used to be, that like this, like if Yzerman was told this back in the day, like he would do it. Like he would find a way to like become a better leader. Now with Larkin, it's just like it may not be received the same way. And that may be where just the gap is in terms of their communication. It's Yzerman's talking to Larkin how Bowman talked to Yzerman, but that may not be the appropriate or the best way to talk to someone like Larkin, who's a lot younger and just, grew up in a different world than Yzerman and had different, coaches than Yzerman had with Bowman and such. And um, all that to say, like, I I think just that is the overall issue here is just two different people not seeing eye to eye, and, like, that's gonna happen a lot, but it's also two people who are very uh, they believe in what they believe in and don't wanna be told otherwise, and so, I don't know if there's, like, a I personally, I'm holding out hope a little bit that there's, like, a heart to heart where Yzerman says, "No, like, we wanna keep you here. Like, I understand where you're coming from. I went through this myself. It's tough. I get it." But, like and having, like, a more empathetic approach than, you know, "Okay, we'll see what we can do for you." Um, but yeah, eh, it it's just it comes down to, like, really just comes down just to two people not seeing eye to eye and neither one of them wanting to budge, and it's unfortunate, like, what the impact of that is.
Evan, I want to ask you a question because I feel like you might give a really fun answer. Um, um, to Tony's point there about there, holding out hope that there's maybe a heart to heart conversation where maybe they can rebuild the bridge and mend the relationship and they can continue forward and you know they can put this behind them. I I thought about that a lot, in the first couple of days after the news came out. In fact, I maybe it was maybe me coping a little bit, but I was thinking maybe this was just like a pushing some urgency type of deal, like, "Hey, I'm serious. If we don't make the playoffs next year, I want out." Since then, I'm pretty convinced, no, the dude wants out now. But in while thinking about that, I thought about, one of the phrases that kinda defines the city of Detroit, which is Detroit versus everybody. And it's a city and a people that have a chip on their shoulder, and it's very, "If you're not with us, you're against us." And Dylan Larkin, whether he, fully understands it or not, kinda drew a line in the sand. And he wants out, and he it's not just 'cause I've talking about other people with this as well. It's not just that he's a Red Wing asking out, that happens. It's that he's the captain asking out. It's that he has 5 years left on his contract. It's that he's from Michigan. He's heard Detroit versus everybody before. He knows what that means, and it doesn't matter. I'm curious, in your opinion, Evan, is do you think it's A, possible that they could that mend this relationship and they can move forward? And then B, do you think that there's a possibility that fans could forgive Larkin? Because the temperature right now doesn't read to me like anyone wants to forgive Dylan Larkin.
No, I think that bridge has been crossed, and this is getting messy and ugly, and you see a lot of things online, a lot of people were talking about, the post-Olympics partying, and maybe that was something that Yzerman wasn't into, and then you got who knows if they're bots or whatever saying, "Oh, yeah, I saw Dylan Larkin out in town, he's been drinking and all this," and, like, it's just gotten ugly, and I'll one up you there with a different saying, when relationships, when things end, they end badly, otherwise, they wouldn't end, and I feel like that's the bridge that's already been crossed here. Um, it's too far in, it's ugly. I don't see him coming back. I mean, just to see the fans turn on him, I don't think I've ever and Tony and I talked about this yesterday. I can't remember a fan base ever turning on a beloved player, especially a guy who's homegrown, as we've said a million times. I've never seen it like that. Like, I don't even remember it being this bad with Stafford. I just don't. And the other thing I'm worried about too is, like, God, What if we have to be like, thankfully Carolina's up tonight, but what if we have to be like the Maple Leafs fans, like who are watching Mitch Marner freaking, in the cup finals, like that's another thing I couldn't handle. I could handle it with Stafford with the Rams. I was, that didn't bother me as much, but God, just going through what Maple Leafs fans, are going through watching this, it must be just painful. The other thing I did want to say really quickly before we shift gears, Tony, um, you know, I can't help but think about the Fedorov retirement night when Fedorov talked about his regret for leaving the Red Wings. Like, and all those guys were there on the ice listening to that speech, and that stuck in my head about like, did he not think this through? Like, is he gonna this is gonna come back to bite him in the ass or regret him? And I think a lot of Detroit fans are rooting for that. And it's just an unfortunate situation all around. I mean, but I will tell you this, it's making for an interesting summer. That it's otherwise we're looking at a summer of whatever. No first round draft pick. Now that maybe there's a possibility of it, reclaiming that first round pick, if a trade is made, it definitely leaves us a lot to talk about this summer.
I agree. I don't remember who said it, so if you're happy to be watching, I'm sorry. Um, Somebody made the point about how they're talking about how they don't think that Larkin understands the severity of what he did. Um, and they mentioned how 15 15 to 20 years from now, um, unless some serious bridges are mended in relations, like he's gonna have to do some work basically if he wants to attend Red Wing alumni outings, basically any alumni golf outing. I don't necessarily think he's welcome anymore. Um, and like it's just that like and that kind of goes to what you said about Sergei Fedorov. Like he obviously did play for other organizations after he left Detroit, but at the end of the day, he went to the Hall of Fame as a Red Wing. He's in the rafters as a Red Wing, and he, like you said, spoke and I regret leaving Detroit. He had basically that's him saying that as an overall look in his career, he identifies as a Red Wing. If Dylan Larkin doesn't win a Stanley Cup wherever he ends up going, the longest period of his career, or at least tenure with one team, will be the Detroit Red Wings. If he goes on to do well for himself, that's where most people will remember him, and that organization will not claim him, and that's going to be a tough thing for him. I this is 15 years down the line, and it might not even be a thing, but it just speaks to it's not just the people you might have pissed off today. It's about the people that still might be pissed off 15 years later because of a situation because of a perceived selfish and emotional decision that you made.
Would you say he's burned his bridge with Red Wings? He's done that with the Red Wings fans, but like, what about the guys in the locker room or management?
That's my biggest question. If I could ask anyone any question about this, I would ask Moritz Seider how he feels about this, and or Lucas Raymond. In fact, Raymond might even be a better one because he's his line mate.
They're friends too. Like that's the thing on top of it. They're actually like friends. Like you saw like photos of like Moritz Seider out, hanging out with Dylan Larkin, pushing Larkin's kid around in a stroller. Like they're friends. And for him to just come out and be like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, sorry guys. Like that's gotta hurt. Like you don't think that you and your friends can get it done, so you're gonna just bounce. Like that that stings.
They signed their contracts with the intent of playing with Larkin. Like that was part of the puzzle for them. Shoot, half the reason why Seider took a 7-year deal instead of an 8-year deal so that his cap hit didn't exceed Larkin's. Like everything that the Red Wings have done from the point Steve Yzerman took over and on has been building around Dylan Larkin for one reason or another. And we can argue how effective it's been, but the intent has always been to build a winner around Dylan Larkin. Now, obviously, it's kind of shifted, and Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond are there, thank goodness. But it's all been for Larkin, and for it to end this way is crazy, and that's why I'd be very curious to hear what Moritz Seider and or Lucas Raymond have to say on the topic, because he's their friend, he's been their brother, he's been their only NHL captain. He basically welcomed them into the league, and for him to basically tell them you're not good enough, this isn't good enough for me. I have to imagine that they have some feelings.
I think it stings for everybody all around. There's really I mean, guess what? You know what? This could all change in a moment when you see what the return is. If the return, either way, Red Wings fans are going to pick through it and say it's not good enough. But this is Yzerman's most pivotal moment of his, GM career with the Red Wings. Like, he's got to nail this, to keep this on track, because otherwise it could get ugly, and it could be the rebuild 2.0 that I think most people are definitely afraid of happening. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap here. I do want to thank Tony for thinking ahead, because Friday is Hawaiian Shirt Day, and since we're recording on Thursday, this airs on Friday, so Friday is Hawaiian Shirt Day. So if you're listening to the podcast, check us out on YouTube, because Tony apparently just watched Office Space and was like, you know what? This airs on Friday, so I'm gonna put my Hawaiian shirt on. That's the greatest. Yeah.
No, 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 no. No, right here. That's why. That's why.
It's Huskies, yeah. I'm assuming, is that your dog?
That's Nico. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
What? A Husky Hawaiian shirt? That's awesome.
Exactly. That's why I'm wearing it, because it's awesome. Like, it's not just any Hawaiian shirt.
I've never seen that.
It's our brand now, I guess.
We're keeping in rhythm here and going off the rails before we go off the air here. So once again, quick reminder of where you can find us. Follow us on Twitter at Flying Octopod. You can also get us on YouTube, subscribe at The Flying Octopod. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, yeah, guys, great fun with the movie trivia today. I wish you guys could have got that one. I thought that was the easiest one, but I teed it up for you. But you guys, again, in the words of Steve Yzerman, or maybe it was Michael Caine, I can't even remember now. You failed me. So thanks for watching episode 85 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. We will be back next week. Thank y'all.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.